Welcome to this Wales TUC Black History Month discussion. I am the Equalities Policy Officer at the Wales TUC, and I will be interviewing the incredible Patrick Roach, who will be introducing himself. This discussion hopes to share three important aspects of the Black experience here in Wales, the first being gratitude, the second celebration, and the third being the struggles and continual plight of Black people of racism across Wales. With me today is the incredible Patrick Roach.
So, really good to be here. And my name is Patrick Roach. I'm General Secretary of NASUWT, the Teachers Union. We have members right across Wales in schools and in colleges, but also right across the United Kingdom. I'm immensely proud to be leading our union, our first Black General Secretary, and one of the very few senior Black leaders across our trade union movement.
Thank you, Patrick. You did mention there one of the very few, and that leads me to my first question, actually. How would you encourage those within the Black community to join a union?
Yeah, well, for me, the most important place for any worker to be, if you're in a job, the first thing to be is to be in a union. It's one of the things that my parents told me very strongly, get a good education, get a job and join a union. And, that's a really important message, because at the end of the day, if you're, in the world of work, you're always going to need support, and you're always going to need some form of advice and information and possibly representation as well. We all know the experiences of many Black workers, no matter who your employer is one in which Black workers are more likely to be finding themselves in a precarious employment situation, maybe the last ones into their workplace, and often identified as the first ones out of the workplace if, for example, an employer is facing difficulty. We also know about the real scourge of racial discrimination in the world of work. But we also know that even just the everyday issues of being in a workplace means that you need a voice. You need to be heard, whether that's to improve your working conditions, to improve your pay in your workplace, whatever it happens to be. A union can be a really powerful voice for you as a Black worker, indeed a voice for all workers. So it's really important to be a member of a trade union. And, if you are a member of a trade union, it's even more important, I think, to be actively involved in your union. And we've heard a lot, we've seen a lot of Black voices, particularly over the course of the last year and a half, during the course of this pandemic and in the wake of the racist killing of George Floyd. We've seen that rise of Black voices. And it's really important that in all of our social, public, civil society organizations, including trade unions, that we're hearing the voices of Black workers as well. In my union, in the NASWT, we want to hear the voices of our Black members, because that means that our policies and our campaigns will always be focused on the Black experience.
Absolutely agree. And I do also think what you touched on was very important, the fact that Black voices were important to be heard, because as throughout history, it's not often been the case. And I just wanted to know what, maybe from your experiences, what changes have you seen in Wales regarding the topic of race, particularly within the workforce, within unions? Do you think it's been progressive, or do you think it's only been progressive because of the recent events with the George Floyd killing, or has it been progressive long before that? How would you analyze and observe the changes?
Well, I think we've seen many changes in Wales and across the UK as well. I mean, I'm equally proud that in Wales we have a Black leader of the Wales TUC, and that in itself is an historic moment, and one that we should never lose sight of. But, I'm absolutely sure that whether it's the General Secretary of the Wales TUC or indeed in my union, having a black General Secretary is not the end of the road. The important thing is that it tells us that there's a challenge ahead. There's a challenge ahead of having more and more black voices being represented at all levels within our trade union structures. I mean, I'm also proud that I've been asked to lead the TUC's anti-racist task force, which is looking very much at the issues of how do we transform our unions to ensure that they're more inclusive, more diverse, more representative of the experiences of black workers in the world of work. But not only how do we make our unions better, how do we make the workplaces out there where black workers find themselves? How do we transform those workplaces as well? And that's crucially important. And unions have a really important role to play. With over 6 million members across our trade union movement in the UK, we are a really important force for change. And it's important that we use the leverage, use the influence, use the power that we have to act on behalf of all of our members, black and white, to ensure that we get fairer, more equitable, more just workplaces for everyone.
An important experience within black people in the workplace is microaggression. It's something that a lot of black people deal with. And I would like to think that having a black leader there is fantastic and it's great. But I've always said that, representation is a doorway that can only be successful if support is the key to unlocking that door. Having someone that's there that looks like you is fantastic, but when they're able to also equip those that are around you by maybe teaching union reps about microaggressions and how to avoid and use specific language and not to reinforce harmful language and toxic stereotypes. I think having that is very important as well within unions and workplaces, just to help the experience and be more progressive, I think, for a lot of black people in unions and things. And my third question is, I understand, as you've previously mentioned, that you have a background in teaching. What do you think about the approach the Welsh government has taken to add Black history to the curriculum? Do you welcome it? I'm sure you do. Do you think there are any concerns, by the way? This is just a cheeky one. Do you think there are any concerns? And would you like to see this in other parts of the country as well?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's right. And not before time that governments are taking seriously the issues of Black history and decolonising the curriculum. And I'm really, really pleased and proud that the Welsh Government, as a result of not only the leadership that we're seeing from Assembly members in Wales, but also the influence of our trade union movement as well in securing that commitment to decolonising the curriculum and to the teaching of Black history as a fundamental right, actually, of every student passes through the school and college system. And I'm proud that Wales is determined to proclaim itself to be working towards the objective of being an anti-racist country. Not just saying that we don't discriminate here in Wales, that we treat everybody the same, that we don't see any difference between people, but actually saying that racism is real and that actually it's our job proactively to be doing something to counter the forces of racism. And that's a really big deal from the Welsh Government. Now, I'm absolutely sure that there'll be many of my members in the NASUWT and far beyond that would say, well, it's an important start, but it's nowhere near enough. And I would agree with that. And I'm sure that many will actually be saying it's an important start, but we need to be doing much more. But we do need that important start. Contrast what's happening in Wales with what's happening in England, where we have a government in Westminster that not only is resistant to the idea of Black history and decolonising the curriculum, but has recently commissioned a review of race and ethnic disparities, which has concluded, and the government seems to have accepted this, which has concluded that effectively systemic and institutional racism does not exist. Well, when you're coming from that point of view, then the situation and the challenges facing Black and minority ethnic communities throughout our country are going to be far, far worse, far, far more challenging. And of course, to boot, we have a Prime Minister that has used language which, frankly, has been pretty reprehensible in the past. So how do we actually move forward? Well, we have to move forward with clear, unequivocal leadership from our political leaders. And that's what we've seen from the First Minister in Wales, and we've seen it from the Education Minister in Wales, to say that racism does exist, that schools have a role to play in tackling it, and that teachers need support, and teachers do need support in terms of dealing with that in the curriculum formally, but also in the informal, the hidden curriculum within our schools, the everyday experiences of Black students in our schools, the disproportionate levels of school exclusion for Black pupils, the relative underachievement of Black students compared with their white counterparts, the outcomes for Black students in terms of their destinations beyond schools, both in the world of training, but also in the workplace. How do we create a fairer and more equitable and just experience for our Black children and young people? That has got to be the task. Schools and teachers are going to need support, but at least that leadership is there in Wales to try to make that difference.
The Welsh government definitely are a little bit more ahead in terms of addressing these issues and being proactive. So proactive, in fact, that they've actually recently produced a race equality action plan. And I was just wondering what your general thoughts were on that. And do you think it's achievable? Do you think its goals and the time frame that it sets out are pretty much achievable, really? How do you see that?
Well, that action plan is certainly comprehensive. It's certainly wide-ranging. It doesn't necessarily include everything, but then again, as I said earlier, it's a start. It's an important start in terms of the direction of travel from the Welsh government. Is it achievable? Well, it certainly should be achievable as long as the will is there and as long as the resources are also put into place to support not only what's happening, for example, within schools, but also supporting communities to feel that actually they can take ownership, they can take responsibility for what's happening both within schools, but also in their own neighbourhoods as well. So we've got to see that leadership, we've got to see that resourcing, we've got to see that support coming through. But I also think that trade unions, NASUWT, the Welsh TUC and others can also play a critically important role. And I come back to the point that I made earlier about why it's so vitally important that we have Black workers as members of trade unions having their voices heard within their individual trade unions. Because, you know, at the end of the day, what I say to my members is this: you know, if you want me and you want the NASUWT to make the difference on race, then you've got to be part of the conversation. You've got to be the part of the conversation with me and with our branches and structures right across the country to ensure that we keep race on the agenda and that we continue pushing, we continue pressing for the change that we want to see. So is it achievable? Well, I certainly hope that it is going to be achievable, but it's our job to make it so.
Definitely. I think accountability will very much make it more achievable. And I hope that the politicians don't drag their feet about this and they really stick by it and get it done. And finally, just a bonus question. What is a valuable piece of advice you have learned in life? Or what would you tell your younger self if you could go back in time?
Well, that's a really tough one, that one. The most valuable piece of experience. Well, I'd go back to that experience of my parents, you know, came to the UK when The British government was seeking labour from the so-called Commonwealth to come here to build our welfare state, to ensure that the economy in the UK could grow and could thrive. And they were crucially important as part and parcel of that Windrush generation to making that crucial difference. But one of the things that they said to me, despite all of the odds that are often stacked against them, was be part of your community, and that whether that was being part of, from their point of view, being part of their religious community, their social community, but in their workplace, being part of their trade union community, and saying, we'll be part of that. And they got knocked back on that from time to time, but it didn't stop them. It didn't make them give up. And that was a really important message that I took from them. So, what would I say to my younger self? It would be just that, I think. The times may have changed somewhat, maybe not as far as we would like them to have changed, but some of the very key issues remain. We have to press for the change that we want to see. We have to recognise that we don't exist in isolation, that we have to be part of our communities, and we have to build alliances with other communities, which will make the difference in terms of the kind of world of work that we want to see and the kind of communities that we want to be living in and we want to be part of. That's how we make the difference. That's what it means to be part of a trade union, to be a trade unionist. And I would implore anybody, whether you're you're entering into the workplace, into the world of work for the first time, or maybe you've got as many grey hairs or maybe more than I have, that actually being part of that commitment to making that difference, that collective endeavour to make a difference, is really what matters.
Grey hairs are a sign of wisdom, Dr. Patrick Roach, so it's all good. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Patrick Roach. Very much appreciated. And that's it for our discussion on Black History Month. You can find out more about this discussion online via the Wales TUC's website, and you can contact us there as well. Thank you, everyone.